Hi, I'm Steve Nelson. This is part one of a three-part video on how to make a paper towel holder using the Project Designer version 3. This is a picture of our finished project. A couple of things we should note here before we actually get started in making our own is the weave pattern, of course, that's placed in a recess or a carve region, the rounded over edge that goes all the way around the perimeter of the end. Now that edge has been trimmed off here at the top, so the top board can sit flush without an unsightly gap that would be caused by the roundover. Also too, there's some wood left here to compensate for that roundover for attaching the apron to the front. The apron also has the same weave pattern with the same spacing, with a nice profile along the bottom edge. Okay, let's switch over to the CarveWright program. This is a finished project also, and you can make note here that the same features that I talked about in the finished project picture, the rounded over edge, the rounded over edge goes all the way around. Now I had to do that because we used the sweep tool to make that, and the sweep tool will only work on a closed path, so I had to make the sweep go all the way around the top. But then I only wanted it 8 inches in height, so I made the overall to begin with 8.5 inches, and then used the cut path tool to trim it off at the edge of the border there. The overall dimensions then is finished is 8 inches. The paper towel end will be 8 inches in height and 6 inches in width. The board is 8 inches in width, which will leave us 1 inch at the top and the bottom for the rollers and a little bit of wiggle room, so to speak. We'll also place it 1 inch from the end of the board. That will allow us to mirror everything that we've done here on this right end. Even though it's on the left end of the board, it is the right end. And when it's completely constructed, we'll mirror everything over to the right side of the board to create the left end. Okay, let's go ahead and get started by creating a new project. Again, that length that we want the virtual board to be is 20 inches, and the width to 8 inches, and the thickness at 0.75. Okay, we want to begin by turning the grid function on and the snap to grid within that grid function. So I'm going to select the layout and the snap and set the grid interval to 0.5 if it isn't already set for that. We want to put a check in the check box, snap objects to the grid. We want to leave this unchecked, snap objects to the edges for now. We don't want to do that. We also want to put checks in view grid, view Bezier control points, and center the grid on the board. And click OK. This puts a half-inch grid or a half-inch pattern on our board, so when we draw, things will be snapped to the corners or the intersections of the grid. We'll begin by selecting the line segment tool and draw a horizontal line. Now it really doesn't matter where you draw it, just as long as it's straight across. And it doesn't matter how long you draw it, because we're going to be using the mouse to move it around, and we're also going to be using the length dialog box here on the toolbar to set the exact length. going to do that now by clicking in that dialog box and typing in 8.5 and press enter. Then you can point to the line with your mouse, click and hold down the left mouse button when you get the omnidirectional arrow, and use it to drag the line around the box or around the screen until you get it 1 inch or 2 grid spaces from the top and 2 grid spaces from the left edge. We're going to complete the drawing by continuing over here on the right edge. We're going to go down 2 inches and then over 2 inches and then down 4 inches to 1 inch short of the edge of the board. Over to the left side to 1 inch short of the edge or the end of the board, and then straight up and to complete the closed vector. And we'll do that with the Connected Lines tool. I'll select that here on toolbar. Point to the vertex on the right end. When you get the starburst, you'll know that you're going to continue the line from that point when you click the left mouse button and release. We'll go down 4 grid spaces, click the left mouse button and release. We'll go to the left 4 grid spaces, again click the left mouse button and release. We'll go down 4 inches or 2 grid spaces short of the bottom edge of the board, click and release. We'll go to the left 2 grid spaces short of the edge of the board, click and release. And to complete the drawing, we'll point to the beginning point of our line. When you get the starburst, click and release. That ends the Connected Line tool, and it also completes our drawing. Now we're going to use this 0.5 inch grid to our advantage right now, and we're going to create an arc across the bottom of this so it rounds over this corner. We're also going to round over this corner to a 0.3 or 0.75 radius, and we'll do that by inserting vertices at the correct points and then deleting the corner. So 3 inches over from the end, we're going to insert a vertex. I'll just do that while I'm here. Right click on the line, select Insert Vertex. Now it doesn't always place it right on the intersection of the grid, so we need to zoom in here a little and click and hold on it and just move it over till it snaps to the grid lines. Zoom back out and do the same thing here. 6 grid spaces up from the corner, or 3 inches. Right click, select Insert Vertex, and again zoom in close and move the vertex until it snaps to the grid lines. Now we're going to create that arc that goes across here by deleting this corner. When we delete this corner, it's going to create a bridge, so to speak, or a diagonal line between the 2 vertices that we just created. So I'm going to right click on that corner and select Remove Vertex. Now we need to convert this line to an arc. We can do that in several ways, but I find the easiest way is just point to it with the mouse, right click with the mouse button, select Form and Arc. And since we had those spaced evenly from the corner, it creates a nice 3 inch radius for us. We don't have to do anything else with it. Now we want to do the same thing with this corner here, but we have to change the grid size. So we'll go to the Layout menu and select Snap and change the grid interval, or the snap interval, to 0.25. Leave everything else the way that it is and select OK. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Now we want a 3/4 inch radius across this corner. So we're going to come 3/4 of an inch in each way from this corner to the left and vertically. 3 grid spaces over. I'm going to right click and select Insert Vertex. Again, you need to zoom in and make sure that that vertex is right on the grid intersection lines. Do the same thing up here. 3 grid spaces up from the corner. Right click, Insert Vertex, and make sure it is snapped to the grid. Now we can delete this vertex on the corner. Right click, select Remove Vertex, right click on the line, select Form and Arc. That will convert that diagonal line to an arc, and since we have 3/4 inch spaced from the corners, it creates a 3/4 inch radius for us, and that's exactly what we wanted. Now our next step is to use the Path Offset tool to offset this line 1/2 inch to the inside. Now we can't leave the grid on to do that. It would interfere with our path offset. So I'm going to turn that grid off by selecting Layout and Snap. Uncheck the Snap Objects to Grid and uncheck View the Grid. You can leave the others. I don't think it'll interfere with anything. And select OK. And then with that vector line selected that we just drew, I want to, here on my toolbar, I'm going to select Path Offset. By default, it wants to draw it the distance of 1 inch to the outside of our drawing. Well, we want 1/2 inch to the inside. So I'm going to change this distance to begin with to 0.5. I'm going to click on the flip button here to flip it to from the outside to the inside. Make sure the fillet style is set to corner and click on OK. And it does a nice job in making a 1/2 inch offset for us. This is a really handy tool. I use this quite often, and I find it to be very, very useful. Now before we go any farther, we're going to do some renaming here. Over in our cut list, when we made that offset, it just called it offset here. Well, if we do any more offsets in our project, it will call them offset also, and it could get a little confusing. So I'm just going to click on the name in the carve list, right click on it and select rename, and we'll just call this recess because we're going to make it a carve region or a recessed area. Type in recess and press enter. And the perimeter on the outside of the line, we'll just call it perimeter. I'll rename it also. Right click, rename, type in perimeter and press enter. Now we're going to make a copy and paste it back into this. We're going to use that copy later on to for the cutout, and the cutout will be adjusted over to cut it off at this profile that we're going to make here in a few minutes. So I'm just going to right click on this and select copy. Right click on the board again and select paste. In our carve list over here, you can see that we now have 2 items called perimeter. We're going to use one as the perimeter and we're going to use the other one as the cutout. So let's rename this last one to cutout. So we don't get them confused later on, and it makes it easy to select them, especially when one is identically to the other one and it's right on top of it. So it makes it easy to select them over here by name. So we'll reselect our perimeter, and we're going to make that profile, or that sweep that goes all the way around, that rounds over the edge. Again, this is a closed path, and we're going to use the sweep corner tool. Mine is set for sweep rounded, so I'll use the pull down to set sweep corner, then click on the tool. Now in the lower portion of the screen, we're going to create that rounded profile. This white line is a representation of the white line here that's on our main drawing. So what we want to do is create an arc from this point here over to the white line, which is a half an inch over to the left of this white line, and a quarter of an inch down, which will create a nice quarter-inch deep rounded over edge. To do that, I'm going to turn the grid function on this lower part. Now you could do it with the attaches and several methods, but I find that using the grid is the easiest. So we'll select layout and snap, and this time we'll set the snap interval to 0.125, or 1/8 of an inch. We want to snap the objects to the grid and view the grid. View the Bezier control points and center the grid also, and then click on OK. This puts a grid pattern that's centered at 1/8 inch increments from the top to the bottom here. This is a representation of the thickness of our wood. We want to draw that arc, and I'm going to use the arc tool here on my toolbar. And we want to begin 1/2 inch over, because it's our profile, or our inset here was 1/2 inch. So we'll come over 4 grid spaces and up close to the top edge of the board. Don't click out in the black area, or it won't create the arc. It'll just create a vertex. So right just below the top of the board, click the left mouse button, and it will snap to the top edge of the board, or the line that's on the top edge of the board anyway, the grid. And then come over here down 2 spaces on the white line, which is a quarter of an inch, and click. And that creates our arc for us. There's only one problem, is the arc goes above the top of the board, which would create a flat spot. So we want to use this center of the arc here, the green dot, and click and hold on it. Now when you do that, you want to drag it down a little ways towards the opposite corner, and when you see the yellow box, this yellow box that's around the outside edge, when you see it disappear, you'll know that this arc will be below the edge of the board. So we'll click and hold and just drag it down until that box disappears, and then release the mouse button. I'm going to go ahead and turn the grid function off. If we use it again in the lower portion of the screen, it will be on and may or may not interfere with what we do. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it off. And we have the arc set the way we want it, and then click on OK. Pretty nice, huh? Now the inside perimeter that we have here, this recess, we called it recess, but we haven't made it a carved region or recess yet. We want to click on it, and I'm going to use the carved region tool here on my toolbar, and when I click on that, it will make a 1/4 inch deep carved region. Now we're going to put the weave pattern in there, and the weave pattern that we're going to use is the one that was created in a previous video. And we determined then that the carved region of 0.15 inches works the best and seems to make the grid look the best. So here in the depth toolbox, up here on the toolbar, I'm going to type in 0.15 and press enter. And while we have it selected, let's go ahead and set the bit optimization to best, so we get the best quality of cut out of it. And we don't have any feather applied to it. We don't want one. If there was one on it, we'd remove it. But let's go ahead and uncheck floor feather anyway. Just as a precaution, it wouldn't make any difference if you left it on, but in this case, because we don't have a floor, or don't have a feather to floor, but if we're not using that function, I just prefer to turn it off. So now we have our project set up to place the weave pattern in the middle. Zoom out here straight on. So I'm going to right click here on the toolbar and turn on my pattern list. Open up the favorites folder, scroll down to my weaves patterns and open that folder. And this CW weave here that I've got is the one that we created in the CarveWright program in the previous video. Now you want to make sure that this checkbox down here for scale to the fit the board is unchecked. We don't want it to scale to fit the board. We just want to leave it the same size that was created. So after that's unchecked, click and hold on the weave pattern and drag it over to the board and drop it. Now I'm going to center it vertically by right clicking on the weave pattern while it's selected, selecting center on the resulting pop-up menu, and then center vertically. That puts it in the center of our workspace. Then I'm going to click on it with the left mouse button and just drag it over until that white line on the left hand edge is just past the carve region. Okay, I'm going to clip the carving now. And before we actually do the clip though, let's go ahead and set the parameters on this so we don't forget to do it later. I'm going to set the bit optimization on the weave pattern to best. It looks a little funny here because the feather's turned on, so we'll remove the feather and again uncheck the floor feather. Now that didn't remove this part of the weave pattern that's going over into our profile going around the edge. That profile is actually a carve region also, along with our recessed carve region here. So when we clip this weave, we're going to clip it. We want it to clip to the inside of this carve region, but it doesn't know which one to do until we do some grouping on it. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on this weave pattern and select Clip Carving Inclusive, and you can see that it clipped it to the outside of our recessed or carve region area, so to speak, and we wanted to clip it to this inside one. So in order to do that, we're going to group the recess. So I'll select it over here and then my carve list. I'm going to hold the control key down and click on the weave pattern here in the carve list, and then I'm going to use the group button here at the bottom to group them together, and that fixes our pattern very nicely. One last thing left to do is to select that weave pattern again and merge it. You can do it from the toolbar here. I'm going to click on the downward arrow and select Merge Additive. And what that does is it'll drop the top of the pattern down a little ways so it's not right up flush with the top edge of the board. That might just be a matter of preference or personal preference. If you choose to leave it up at the top of the board, it certainly wouldn't hurt anything, but it'll make the weave pattern a little bit deep, I think, and I think it looks better by dropping it down a little bit. Merges it to the back of the recess. Okay. In the next video, we're going to put the circle in for the paper towel bar that goes through, or the dowel. We'll also size and create the cutout going around the outside edge. We'll also create the rabbit on the back. We're going to create a rabbit on the back side of this edge right here to accommodate the back. When we cut the back is just a square board, so during assembly it'll fit into its own recessed area, and the the back will be flush with the back edge of the end. We'll do all that in the next video. So we're going to close for now, and we'll see you in the next video.